Good morning, dear friends. Today is Monday, October 4th, the 28th of Tishrei. We're heading towards Rosh Chodesh. Today we're gathered once again to study the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time, Masechet Shabbat, chapter 8. It is 78. We are on 78b, hopefully 79a. We are presently talking all about the smallest volume of an item, the smallest size of an item that will get you in trouble for carrying on Shabbos. And the principle really is the smallest amount of an item or the smallest sized item that would be functional and useful. That is generally speaking the rule. It's not quite so simple because certain items have multiple uses, multiple conceptions, and our Gemara is going through that process, through that journey. Yesterday, we didn't cover a lot of ground per se, but I found it very interesting and informative. And primarily our discussion yesterday was what is a piece of paper useful for, and what is the smallest amount of writing on a paper that could be considered impactful and cause a valuable contribution in your life. And that was the discussion yesterday. And we discovered or introduced the fact that there were tax collectors or toll-like payments that were mandated at certain junctures on roads and travel and in certain jurisdictions. And you would have to pay a toll-like arrangement, and you'd receive a receipt that you'd have to present. It's possible that what was happening was they were paying some kind of red cashier or vendor further away, and then you had to give your receipt when you pass through or when the inspector came by, maybe like some of the trains where you buy your ticket and then you're asked to present it at a certain point. And that apparently was larger letters, but the smallest piece of paper, the smallest slip that people would typically interact with, led us to a conversation about different size fonts in the ancient world. And although we don't have any solid answers, we had some very good perspectives. That was the crux of yesterday's discussion. Today, we're going to go talk about papers and documents. And when documents, we started yesterday, but when is a document no longer of any use? But before we do that, Reb Beryl, please go ahead.
It might be interesting to the group. I don't know if they noticed, this guy Bansky, the artist, did a painting for sold for $1 million, and then there was a thing that stripped the paper in it. They are now selling the half painting and half of the paper, which has been stripped, for $4 million.
Hold on.
So there's unlimited things that could be done with shredded paper.
Hold on. Please explain what happened. There was a painting that was of high value.
There was a painting that was sold for $1 million. After it was sold, inside the frame, he had a shredder, and it shreds.
Oh, okay, yes, I did see that. Because the art wasn't the art. The art was the chachma of the fact that a piece of art could be shredded, and the art was the chachma of the shredding of the art.
But now they have the thing which is half shredded and half painting, and it's going at Sotheby's with $4 million.
Yeah. By the way,
the art was the gimmick.
Right.
Of course.
It's mind-boggling how to make money out of nothing.
Now, it pains me to say this because this Banksy is incredibly brilliant and very thought-provoking. Unfortunately, he's not a lover of Israel or the Jewish people.
No, he did stuff on the wall. Terrible.
Which is tragic because he's definitely we'd say a Chevraman. He's definitely but unfortunately he's part of. He had the wrong friends in yeshiva. Anyways, so that is that.
His price for the painting just dropped to $20.
All right, so we're going to continue the Gemara. Shambar, can I bother you for a second? On my stender, there's a Teres Levi Yitzchak, or the Kut Levi Yitzchak. If you can just bring that for a second, if you see it. All right, so we're going to share the screen. We're going to get started again, trying out a new microphone. Hopefully the sound quality is improved to some extent. I guess I'll listen to the recording and I'll know afterwards. But at least so far, everyone's indicated it hasn't been diminished. So that's got to be worth. Thank you. I don't think it does actually. While we're getting ready, I'm just going to take a picture. I told you I sent it to you yesterday and I failed to do so. I just want to show you what a margin is good for. I'm going to send it to the Chabura group so you can take a look at your convenience. And we're going to share the screen. And let's get started. Safaria Thank you, Safaria. Talmud Shabbat Ch8, 878b. All right. Again, we're learning and we're honoring the neshama of Daniel Yerachmiel ben Gedalia, and we're davening for the speedy healing for Leah, Bas, Rita. So that is that.
So good.
All right, here we go. So yesterday we spoke about what good is a tax receipt that was already, what good is a tax receipt that was already spent? And the Gemara said it's possible that there is not much of a use, but it's good to prove credibility. It's good in case someone comes after you. It's good if you ever get audited. And so suffice it to say, there is a savara, there is a consideration that you might want to hold on to your tax receipts. That was the previous Gemara. Along those same lines, we're now going to talk about a shtar chayv, a promissory note. If there's a document stating that you are owed a certain amount of money, so what's the deal? Can you carry it on Shabbos? Does it have any value? Well, obviously, if it was not paid out, it's valuable. It's worth the amount of it's worth the dollar amount on the document. But what if it was already used? And so that's going to be the discussion of the Gemara. And then there's going to be a question of if it was already delivered, if it was already paid, is there still value? And that's going to be this first discussion. And then we'll get into ancient paper making methods. Again, Tana Rabbanan. Hamoitzi shtar chayv, a person carries a promissory note on Shabbos. Ad shalei paru, if it wasn't paid out, chayiv, it's very valuable. Misha paroi, once the document has been spent, it's been delivered.
Okay.
So
I'm not
this
going to show you, but
document-
what I need is what I.
The document has no significance as a document. So Potter, you should be exempt. Let's read Rashi. Misha paru, Potter lekam mefarsh. The Gemara is going to explain why. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees and says, Af misha paru chayiv. Even when a document was already paid out, you want to still chayiv for carrying it. Mipnei shetzorech loy, because one yet has need for this document. What is the need? For the document? We'll see soon. The Gemara asks, "My beinayu, what is the crux of the disagreement? What is the difference in reality between these two opinions? Is the document still have value? The promissory note still have value when it's been paid or not? Because that doesn't make sense. Surely, it shouldn't have value. Rav Yosef, here is the question. Asar l'shais shtar parua ika beinayu. The machlokes is, are you allowed to maintain a document that is no longer in force, a promissory note that's already been paid up, and so now it's void, it's been voided? Do you have to put it into Banksy's shredder, or can you hold on to it? Rabbanon Savri, the rabbis say, Asor l'shai shtar barua. You're not allowed to hold on to such a document. Being that you're not allowed to hold on to the document, it's worthless. There's nothing you could do with it because the Jewish, the Torah, the rabbinic expectation is that you're going to get rid of it. Therefore, there's not much you could do with it. And therefore, it's so useless, you could be chayiv for carrying it. I'm sorry. It's so useless, you're potter, because it's like you're carrying something that doesn't exist. But Rabbi Yehuda believes, mutter l'shai shtar parua. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that you can keep it not for the value on the document, but you could use it to stuff a box before you move, or to put into the, or you could use it to wrap up a jar that you're selling or buying or shipping. And so, Let's think about it. You have a piece of paper, nice big piece of paper. It says on it $300,000. That's really nice. It's nice if the borrower will actually pay it out, or you'll use it to collect collateral or whatever it is. And it's got a lot of value. You certainly want to preserve it and keep it and carry it around. Once it's been paid out, it's been stamped, whatever, paid or whatever. So as a document, it has no value. What is its value now? It's a piece of paper. Can you use this piece of paper for something other than what's written on it? Well, it depends if you're allowed to own it or not. If you're not allowed to keep it, you're not allowed to own it. Well, then you better not bring it to the store and wrap up the stuff you're selling. That would be prohibited. That's a problem. So it has no value. Rabbi Yehuda says no. You can use it for shipping or wrapping or whatever, and therefore the value is that you could use it for shipping and wrapping, whatever you use, wrapping paper or newspaper. It's actually like, what is the value of an old newspaper? Old news. Well, the stories are old and maybe they're obsolete, but you could still use it to wrap something or to put under the pet, the pets, to put out for the pet or whatever. So their uses. I know we can get into all different political jokes about different papers and their value or their absence of value. But let's punt once again. Beryl.
And I'm wondering why we're going off on this tangent. You're not allowed to carry. So I understand the size of the paper, etc. What do we care what's written on it? You're not allowed to carry, not allowed to carry.
No, I'll explain. It's a good question. The caring about what's written on it is not immediately related to the laws of Shabbos. It's related to the ethics of holding on to a promissory note that's already been paid.
Yeah, but
why?
you're having suvas. You're not allowed to carry it.
Exactly. Exactly. It's unethical. I'll explain to you why it's unethical for someone to hold on to a promissory note that's been paid without, because
claim it wasn't paid.
Exactly. You might claim it wasn't paid, or chas v'shalom, after 120, the kids are going through the estate and they're very excited. They found the promissory note, $500,000 they didn't owe. They didn't know about. And it's a baba maisa, and the money was long paid. And so for that reason, ethically, Chazal, at least according to one opinion, say you may not maintain such a document. Why would there be a svar that you're allowed to hold on to it? Well, maybe it's the borrower that has the document. It's now a receipt that it's been paid. I don't know. There's things we can consider. It's not really the place to discuss it is not Mesachah Shabbos. It's in the place that we talk about economics and finance and commerce. But suffice it to say, the machlokes is, can you keep it? If you can keep it, it has value. If you can't keep it, it has no value. Why do we bring this up? Because we're talking about papers that have interesting things written on it, but it's not good for anything. Then 1,000 years later, someone finds the document and it's fascinating, right? The Cairo Geniza, I can't help myself. The Cairo Geniza is full of documents that were long obsolete, but if 1,000 years pass, it becomes interesting again. But I'll tell you this, the value of those documents are not the same as the cost of storage for those 1,000 years. So anyways, okay. Now let's go on. Let's continue the discussion. Continuing along the subject, another way to understand the machlokes. So the first explanation was, are you allowed to hold on to the document or not? Abaye says no. Kuli alma asr lashe shtar parua. Everyone agrees. There's no excuse to hold on to a promissory note that's been delivered. It's asking for trouble. Here we're talking about a document that the borrower agrees that it represents a real transaction and it's legitimate, and therefore you should hold on to it. And here's the argument. One opinion says that if the debtor admits that he wrote the note, it needs to be verified. Does there need to be a process of verification, even if the borrower admitted that it's him? And Rabbi Yehuda says no. His confession, his admission is enough to give weight to this document. Hold on. And what does it mean? A document Hold on. Let's go back to the original comment. It says Mishaparai Potter. When it was paid out, you're exempt. My actually parai. What does it mean, Mishaparai? What do they mean? Until the person that borrowed gives the document value or not. Let's read Rabbi Steinsaltz's explanation. If the debtor says, I prepay the debt. I'm sorry, I repay the debt in the promissory note, but there were no witnesses. So now the document has no value. If this is the opinion of the rabbis who say that it's such a document, it doesn't work. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the document doesn't need to be established, doesn't need to be koyim. So the guy's claim that he paid it doesn't help, and therefore you can't carry it. Again, let me just say like this. A document, a promissory note that's unsigned. If a person says, yeah, that's my handwriting, does that automatically make the document powerful enough to collect from the borrower? Well, then the borrower cannot say, yeah, it is my handwriting, but I paid it out. And therefore, this document has a lot of weight. If he can say, it's my handwriting, but I paid it out, so now it's worthless again. So it's just another more complex arrangement where you might have a paper, and depending on the opinion, the paper has a lot of value or no value. If the person's words alone make it a valuable document, well, then you can't carry it. But if it still needs to be verified, well, then it's worthless in the moment, and therefore it has no value. Let's continue the Gemara. We're now on page 79a. Hold on. I've intentionally glossed over to some extent that Gemara because the only other option is to dig very deeply into the laws of contracts and the value of speech. But I want to get into the carrying on Shabbos. Rebbe, I'll go ahead.
I was thinking of a weird case where you could leave the house with something that has no value, and during Shabbos it obtains value.
Very interesting.
You have a lottery ticket, and they pick the lottery at noon on Shabbos.
Interesting. Definitely something to think about. I don't know if that's exactly but you're giving us a good space to consider a piece of paper that's worthless, or on the contrary, Rebel, you could walk outside and the document is worth $1, and by the time the lottery is drawn, it's worth $0, right?
Yeah.
Although some might say that it's always worth $0. But then the lottery says you never know.
You got to be in it to win it.
Oh. All right, let's see Rava's explanation. Rava says everyone agrees that if the debtor admitted to a document, it doesn't matter. There still needs to be the Beis Din still needs to establish and give the document force or not. And here the debate is where you always write a receipt. Or rather, the question is, was a receipt written? The opinion that says that you are the Tanakama holds that you're chayiv for carrying it, because if the lender ever pulls out the document, the borrower better be holding on to his receipt. So therefore, you're allowed to use it on Shabbos to wrap your jar. And if you used it on Shabbos, because you could wrap your jar with it, therefore, if you carried it, you're chayiv. Rabbi Yehuda says you don't write a receipt. Being that you don't give a receipt, you're not allowed to hold on to such a document. And being that you're not allowed to hold on to such a document, you can't use it for anything. And therefore, if you carried it, you're putter. I know this is a little complicated, but again, if it has a use, it's valuable to you, you're chayiv for carrying it. If it has no use, or you're not allowed to use it, then it has no value to you, and therefore you're putter. So ironically, the more valuable the document is, the more problematic it is to carry. So in a place where you write a receipt, so the document is less scary and therefore you can keep it. But in a place where they don't write receipts, then you better get rid of this document right away, ethically. And that is the explanation of Rabbi Ravashi Amar. Ravashi says there's still, you still need to hold on to it because you need to show that you're a person who pays up when they owe it. So this was the case of the paid the paid or voided promissory notes, 3 different understandings of why one would be chayiv or potter. No, I'm sorry, Alan. I muted you, but you're the wrong person. I'm sorry. So that is someone's giving us a lot of feedback. I'm sorry. No, Dr. Hammer, it's possible it's you. Is it possible you have 2 different machines on?
It is, but it's in another room.
Do
Okay,
you mind?
I'll go shut it off.
No worries.
No problem. No problem.
All right,
No problem. Also, I'll excuse that they're working on the roof here, so I'm avoid here. You can start hearing
Oh, Gewalt.
banging. That's why I'm gonna show it off my computer. I'm gonna stay on my iPad, and let's see if that helps. Okay.
And Doctor, just to check. Hey, Doctor, I'm sorry, I just muted you for a moment. There. Oh, Doctor, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, now we hear you, and I think without a problem. I think so. Oh, but probably you wanted to mute. You wanted to shut this one off, right?
Let me just shut this. Let me leave this. Okay, I'm leaving the meeting here.
Oh, okay. So now that we finished, so basically it was a few different variables of how to understand if a used promissory note has value or doesn't have value. The crux of the issue is, can you keep it or not? The less value, the less power a paid promissory note has, well, the more likely it is you can hold on to it, and therefore it has value. If it could still be effective, and therefore you need to get rid of it, therefore it has no value, therefore you're not high for carrying it. It's not that complicated. It's a little bit of a multi-step logic over here. And there's different ways to understand that. Are we talking about a used document? Are we talking about a document that needs verification? There's no signature or whatever else. And that was our discussion. Our Mishnah now goes on, or our Gemara now goes to address another point in the Mishnah. The Mishnah talks about how small is the smallest piece of leather that's choshev, that has a use. Today, there's all different uses for leather, scraps of leather that can be turned into a wallet, or what else can you do with a piece of scrap leather or hide?
Use it for a patch.
You can use it to patch, or you could use it to, well, anyways, there's a lot of different things you could use a scrap leather.
I have to leave. Sorry, gentlemen.
Beryl, good to have you as long as we are here. Well, as we saw in the Mishnah, the smallest item they could make in the ancient world is not that different than today. You can make a little wallet or a little pouch. And the Mishnah says that leather, the amount to make an amulet, is the size of leather that you're not allowed to carry because you want it, and it could be a problem. That was the teaching of the Mishnah. If you recall, when we were reading the Mishnah, I was perplexed. Raw leather, you could write an amulet on it, and right away, I think Rashi or maybe one of the other commentaries told us we're not talking about the actual amulet, we're talking about the pouch for the amulet. Now let's see the Gemara. Rava asked Rav Nachman, Hamoitzi arba kama. How much hide is a problem? Amar lei. So Rav Nachman says, Rava, what's going on? Don't you remember there's a Mishnah? Kidetanan or kidelasis kameya. There's a Mishnah, you know the Mishnah, right? It says that the amount of leather to make a kameya. Okay. Hama abdoi. There's some versions that delete these words. Hama abdoi. Now, what if a person has the leather in order to tan it, bekama? How big is that piece of leather? It's the same size. Le abdoi bekama. Now, what if you're carrying it in order to bring it to the tanner? These sound very similar, and so many versions, I think, delete this one. Le abdoi bekama. If you're carrying the leather in order to tan it, how big must it be? Amar leilashna. So he says there's no difference. It's the same as the Mishnah. It's the size to make a kameh. Rashi. Hamoitzi or bekama. So Rashi says, don't think that Rava didn't know the Mishnah. Mishum de boyi lemivi minei hanach boyi achrina boyi minei hav afagav demestisni. Sometimes you want to lay out or you set up your question. And so you might even ask the first question you know the answer to, but the answer to the first question validates or establishes the premise for the second question. So Rashi says, Rabbi Label, what you said was incorrect. Rav Nachman never accused Rav of not knowing the Mishnah. It's just a way of communicating. Rashi le'abed, what does it mean to be tanned? Leather, or it's not leather anymore, hide, that's waiting to be tanned. And it was not yet processed. What is the size of that leather that is a problem for carrying on Shabbos? So that was his question. And Rav Nachman responded, it's the same it's the same size, it's the same measure. Then Rav Nachman says, we know Tamra. How do I know that there's no difference between the finished product and the raw material? You have the hide, that's the raw material. You have it once it becomes processed. How do I know it's the very same dimensions, the very same size? And Rav Nachman says, I'll bring you a Mishnah. There is a Mishnah that proves to us that it makes no difference if the material is processed or not. It's the same dimensions. What's that Mishnah? Hamelabein. If you have wool that you want to whiten with cleaning it, the hamenapets. Again, these are things that we learned last parak, right? We went through all the different malachas. Hamelabein, if you whiten the wool, the hamenapets, and if you comb it, the hatzoiveya, and if you dye it, v'atoive, and you spin it, all the different steps that need to be applied to a wool. Shi'uroi, how much of this unfinished product that you're processing is a problem on Shabbos to carry? Let's read Rabbi Steinsaltz's translation. It is double the full distance between the forefinger and the middle finger. So you have the distance between two fingers. That's an interesting measurement. I don't think we've encountered it yet. Let's see Rashi. It's the distance between the two fingers. Let me see something. Bear with me a moment. Yeah. So when you separate your fingers, so it creates a little bit of a distance. Double that distance is how much material is problematic. Why is that the measurement? I don't know. The truth is I don't know a lot about processing wool, but what I can imagine is that has to do with the process or the value of this material as you process it. Give me one more second. Anyway, suffice it to say, people that were in that industry must have known this measurement well. If we have any questions about it, we could also refer back to yesterday's discussion about measurements. So there we have it. So whether the wool that's being cleaned or combed or spun, etc. If you weave two strands, or it's material that's being held on to, in order to weave. That is also the same measurement of the distance between the two fingers. That is the amount that's a problem to carry. So Alma, what do we see here? Being that this unprocessed wool is just waiting to be spun, and when it's spun, it'll be a certain amount of yarn. We apply the measurement that's more relatable in thread, in yarn. We apply it to the unprocessed product as well. Because we look at wool and say, I know what that's going to be. it's heading one direction. It's going to be one thing. It's going to be a yarn or thread. And therefore, we apply the dimensions even before it's been processed. Hachanami, the same thing should be applied to hide that's going to be turned into leather. Kivon de la'able, koi, being that it is just sitting and waiting to be tanned. Shi'urai kime'ubed, we treat it as far as what's valuable to have the same dimensions as already treated wool. Any questions or comments? Well, those are the dimensions that are a problem to carry because it's considered leather. So now we ask the next question. What if you're holding on to hide and your intention is not to, the intention is not to process it, it's not to tan it. It's still the same dimension. That's interesting. Period. He says there's no difference. Why not? I don't know. It's an interesting question. All right, that's it. Loishna, it's still the same dimension. Could you use hide that's not been tanned in products? Is there value to it? I'm assuming there must be.
Might have a big odor.
Might smell. I don't know. I'm not sure what you do with it, but it seems like there must have been something that you could do with it. Otherwise, I don't know why he would say that there's no difference. Or maybe we look at every piece of leather as if it's going to be tanned, even if you're not going to tan it. I don't know. So now the Gemara asked the question. I guess that's the Gemara's question. Is there really no difference between leather that's tanned, hide that's tanned, or hide that's turned into leather and hide that's not turned into leather? You've got to agree there's a difference. Rashi. No Rashi. Is there no halachi difference between the hide that's going to be tanned and not? Esvei, we're going to have a text, a braisa, that clearly indicates that there's a big difference between stuff that's going to be processed and stuff that's not going to be processed. How's that? Hamoitzi samonim shiruyim. Person carries out the stuff that makes dye. The herbs that were already soaked and ready, prepped. And they're going to be used for dyeing. Dugma le'ira. So now...
So if I can interject, untanned hide, I just Googled it, is rawhide.
Right, rawhide. What do you do with
And
rawhide?
rawhide can be used, for instance, for baseball gloves, shoelaces, other things. So there is a use for rawhide for untanned hide.
So doctor...
That's a point to Google.
Doctor, could you imagine it's the possibility of someone making a kameya holder out of untanned hide too?
I could.
So that, I guess that would be in our concept.
I mean, why not? I mean, if you can write on it.
If you can make a baseball glove.
It's less expensive. He's got a bigger, bigger margin.
So if you can make a baseball glove or okay. By the way, that's something we didn't consider. Maybe a little strip of hide is good for a shoelace. No, but it probably has to be pretty long. So I don't know if in the days of the Mishnah they had shoelaces in the way we do.
No, but they had sandals.
They had sandals with straps, but not shoelaces. Maybe they did. I don't know, but I don't think so. Or baseball bats for that matter. Or baseball gloves.
Well, they made strings for amulets.
Right, that's true.
They could make the string around the neck from
Interesting.
Probably make a saddle for a horse or a camel or a donkey.
But that's going to be a lot bigger piece of leather, probably.
Yeah, I know. But I'm just saying.
Right.
Rawhide is useful.
Oh, shkaya. So now we're going to ask, is there really no difference between something that's processed and something that's not processed? So let's first take a look at his citation from the Bryce. If you carry the herbs, the vegetation that's going to be used in a dye or in the process of dyeing, you carried it. How much is considered a problem to carry on Shabbos? If you carried out enough that could dye A dugma le'ira. I'm going to look at Rabbi Steinsaltz here. A stopper for the shuttle of a loom. Rashi, dugma. Klemer ma'at. Ke'ein shemarim ledugma loymar roitza atavazeh. A sample, a dugma. Right, in Hebrew we say ledugma. You have a question, I'll give you an example. Well, sometimes you want to show a dugma, a sample of the item that you're selling. So even if it's just the amount that you dye to dye a sample, which is about the size of an ira. Rashi, v'ukeshir hatzorich li'ira shel gardi listoim pikana shepkias adam nusinaba. Suffice it to say, it's a piece of the weaving process, and there was a stopper, which was obviously very little. So basically, carrying herbs that are enough to dye the smallest little something is already a problem. That's what the Brisa says. However, Tanan, a Mishnah teaches us, klipe agoizim, nutshells, klipe ribonim, and the pomegranate shells, or stem upua, safflower and madder, which we've had before. Remember, we had madder a while back. We looked it up. These items, safflower and madder, if it's enough to dye a beged cotton, a small garment, a small cloth that's big enough for the savacha, which Rabbi Steinsaltz here says is the woman's hairnet, the opening of a woman's hairnet. Rashi. We're talking about the moist nut covering, not the dry, hard one. Okay. And then we have sitim, which are vishuda, or pua, which is vartzna, which we already looked up a long time ago. Pisvacha. This is the cover for the open space on a woman's hair covering. But bottom line is, apparently, this beged katan is most likely a whole lot bigger than the dugma. The dugma is just a small sample. It's marala, and what is the reason between the contradiction of how much dyeing materials is a problem to carry? So Rav Nachman explained regarding this apparent contradiction. A person doesn't go through the hassle of dyeing such a small little piece. If you're already going to be dyeing, you're going to dye a larger item. Okay, here is what I understand. I'm not sure I have all the answers to the whole question over here. But the bottom line is, we had a question. Is there a difference between hide that's going to be processed and hide that's not going to be processed?
It's only on the finishing product. One is refined and the other is raw.
Hold on. Let me see. I want to make sure what I said is right. Hold on. Hold on. So we're talking about hide, and they say there's no difference whether it's been tanned or not. And so we brought proof from other processes of preparing wool. We said even though the wool isn't yet processed, we treat it as if it was already processed as far as its dimensions. And then we said that maybe there's a difference between if it's already been processed or not. And the challenge we brought was from dyeing. And particularly the challenge was okay, I'm sorry. When it comes to dyeing, a person doesn't make doesn't bother themselves for the smallest possible valuable dye piece of material. You're going to dye a larger piece of material. But with leather, we do value even the smallest piece of leather so long as you can make a kamea. So in other words, we can't precisely compare tanning to dyeing. When it comes to dyeing, you're not going to make yourself crazy for a little shoelace or a little piece of a little strip of material. So you only make yourself crazy for a larger material. With hide, even the smallest piece of hide, so long as you can make a little kamea holder, it's valuable. I imagine the reason being that leather products are a whole lot more expensive and more valuable on the market than a little strip of paper, little piece of a dugma, a sample. A sample doesn't have much value. A sample is only valuable to the craftsman to make a sale. So the craftsman who's making the stuff will make a bigger thing. But with hides, if you've ever traveled and if you ever go to a market and they'll try to hawk you some leather stuff, you can find yourself paying a steep price. I'm not a very traveled person, but if I recall correctly, when we were in Italy for a wedding a long time back, we traveled. So I think they try to sell you all these different tchotchkes, and they'll try to. If you're an American, you'll pay $30 for a little kamea holder. What good is a kamea holder if you don't have a kamea? Not good for anything, but leather stuff fetches a good price. I imagine what we're saying here is that the leather craftsmen are comfortable processing even a small piece of leather if you can make something out of it. And that's the reason why, although by leather, there's no distinction if it's hide or leather. By dyeing, there is. I believe that's what the Gemara is saying over here. And I'm sorry if there was any temporary wobble. Now, interestingly, find other things as well that have different measures before and after its use. Let's see the next one. A similar question. We find, in other words, that sometimes we make a big difference between something before and after it's processed. Let's look at seeds. If you carry a seed on Shabbos before it's planted, how much is a problem? You're liable for carrying seeds if it's less than a gegeres. Rabbi Huda Omer Chamisha. Rabbi Huda says we're talking about 5 seeds. We're talking about seeds that could be edible and also they could be used for planting. So the seeds, see, usually gegeres is a measurement that's applied to food. Here we're talking about zaronegina. We're talking about stuff that's going to be planted, but we give it somewhat of a treatment of eating. So it's a little bit smaller than a fig. So we're talking about a few seeds, a handful of seeds. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says chamisha. It's 5 seeds. So there's a new tanan, but once they've already been planted, the Mishnah says zevel v'chol hadak, fertilizer or manure, we could say v'chol hadak, and very fine earth. How much are you not allowed to kedei lazabel by kelach shel kruv? It's the dimensions that is useful to fertilize kelach shel kruv, a stalk of a cabbage. Rabbi Kiva, that's what Rabbi Kiva has opinion. It's the size to fertilize a leek. So the question here is as follows. What do we look at as a seed? What's considered valuable or a problem to carry? 1 seed or multiple seeds? Before it's planted, it's multiple seeds. After it's planted, we look at even 1 fertilizer that treats 1 stalk. Rav Papa explains, I'm sorry. So we see here is that there's a difference between an item before and after. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. Why here are we comfortable assuming that with leather, it's always the same measure? So the Gemara answers, when Papa gave an explanation. When we're talking about 5 seeds or a handful of seeds that you can carry, or that's how much you can carry, that's when it can't be planted, or that's when it's planted. If it's for eating, hold on, let me just make sure we get this right as well. When do we say that even one plant is a problem? It already sprouted, and so you're guaranteed that's going to work. Once this plant is sprouting, you see a lot of potential and you're willing to invest more effort. But when you're carrying seeds that haven't sprouted, you're not going to carry one seed because the odds of one seed sprouting are not so high. You know that you need to plant a few seeds and see hopefully one of them or some of them will fertilize. And so being that you're carrying unsprouted seeds, therefore, you're only chayiv for carrying the amount of seeds that you typically deal with as seeds. So, and I think we're going to end over here. So basically, again, the Gemara asked the question, how many seeds is valuable? How many plants are valuable? One, multiple. Initially, we said multiple, only multiple are a problem for carrying. One, you might be potter. Then later on, we say, you're chayiv for treating even one seed. So the Gemara's question was, if one seed is significant enough for treatment, for fertilization, well, then why isn't one seed itself considered a problem for carrying? Why isn't one seed chashav in isolation? And the answer is a good answer. A seed that's only a potential has a lot less value than a seed that's already proven that it's going to grow.
Rabbi?
Yes, doctor, please.
So when we talk about garinim and sunflower seeds, you have them in your pocket of your jacket.
Yes.
Which category is that in? Is it what? Do you need one or you need 5? It's edible already. It's edible already, but you could also plant it, I believe.
That's a very good question. First of all, I think most of the garinim that we eat are already toasted, and so I don't believe that they're actually able to grow. However, the question is yet a good question, because suppose it is something that could sprout, and I'm sure there are certain seeds that maybe even pomegranates, right? We eat them or other kinds of. So I think I'm not certain. What I believe here, we're talking about in the context of gardening. However, if it's packaged, if it's served in a package, or you got it at a stand in the shuk,
right?
I believe then we view it in the measure of food, which is usually around the gogaras. So I believe we those seeds. Now, but you're asking a good question, because let's say semichkes, the sunflower seeds. I don't know, because it's not just a food; it's a social, right?
It's a culture. It's a whole culture.
It's a culture,
right?
I remember when we had yeshiva students from Eretz Yisrael when I was a kid, and I remember they borrowed the car, and when we got the car back, we knew that fine young Israeli boys were in the car because the whole car was covered in sunflower seeds. And in Hollywood, Florida, we didn't really consume sunflower seeds ever. Certainly not that much. So yeah, it's a social food. So I don't know if there's going to be a different application. Do we count this? Do we count the cover of the seed? Are we measuring the seeds? Is it I don't know. I mean, it's known. I just don't know right now.
It was a precursor for movie theater goers in Israel before popcorn became available. Yeah.
I was just going to say that you should have seen the floors in movie theaters in Israel.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I can only imagine. So where's your barrel to say where else would we discuss social habits of moviegoers in Israel? Anyways, so that concludes today's Gemara. So today I would say was maybe a little bit more, let's see, might have had to try a little harder to hold on. Suffice it to say, today we covered really 2 or 3 very thought-provoking topics. Today and all in the subject of carrying on Shabbos. We spoke about a promissory note, what good is a promissory note? And then not only what good is a promissory note, but if it's been paid out, is there any value to the paper? And part of that's going to depend on if it's stamped paid or if there's a way to verify that it's no longer in force, then I suppose you could use it for wrapping. This is not exactly the words of the Gemara, but this is what I guess we could extract from the Gemara. However, a promissory note that looks like it always did. It's not torn, it's not shredded, and someone might be able to carry it again. Well, there's a halacha. You can't just keep it around. If you can't keep it around, it doesn't have much value. And then we had some variations of that issue. And then we spoke of leather. How big is the smallest piece of leather that's valuable? Well, the smallest leather craft that you make. And that is an amulet. But what if it is processed? It isn't processed. And Rav Nachman over and over said, it's the same size. And then we had different questions. How do you say it's the same size? In other stuff, there are different volumes for before and after it's processed, like wool. That's what we said. I'm sorry, no, wool was the example where it's the same. But then we said, but what were the examples that were the questions? What about for dyeing? Didn't we find that the different dimensions? We said, yeah, for dyeing, although the smallest item you dye might be a certain size, but you don't bother yourself unless a little bit of a larger size. Then we said, what about planting? Don't we find that there's a difference between the plant and the seed before it's been planted and after? Yeah, we said that's very different because one seed is only potential. It's not a plant. Leather that's unprocessed, you have it already. It exists. It's guaranteed. And so there's a difference between the amount of risk or the value per risk that a person is willing to take. I think that's why people who buy out, I actually stayed away, although someone could have brought it up and I would have been in trouble. But I know it's a big sugya of people buying the mortgage companies, right? They do the loan and then they sell off sell, right? And that's been the cause of possibly the cause of the crash in 2007. I know it's a little more complicated. It was the insuring of those and other kinds of loans. But the point is that I didn't go into because I would have gotten in big trouble. But I imagine we could apply those ideas as well. How valuable is a note if it hasn't been paid yet? Probably something like a seed. You don't know how much value it's going to bring you. It depends on if they're going to, if they're going to pay or they're not going to pay, if they're going to default, if you're going to have to collect, and maybe what you can collect is more valuable than the note. So there are a lot of variables, kind of like seeds. So if one seed, once it sprouts, is very valuable. It's a plant. It's going to make you many fruits. But
I could just imagine somebody coming into shul on a Saturday morning with a white shirt and a sliced beet in his pocket. They would call the Hatzalah very fast.
Yep. So that's today's Gemara, dear friends. Thank you all for your patience, holding on tight in today's Gemara. Hashem's help will resume tomorrow. And tomorrow it'll actually be a whole lot simpler because tomorrow's primary discussion is going to be about the production of leather, the different types of leather, parchment, how parchment was made, if there's a difference between tefillin, mezuzah, sefer Torah. So I believe it's going to be a very interesting and a little bit more of a, not literally, but conceptually, a little bit more of a hands-on and relatable Gemara. So please join us tomorrow then. Have a wonderful day. Be healthy and well. Chumash is going to start at the same link in just a moment. Have a wonderful day.
You too, Rabbi.
Oh, yeah.